We're back! Alright, welcome. So, if you watched the tutorials that are up on the YouTubes before, or maybe you were here live last time, who knows, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into Maya. Again, this is meant to be a super beginner course. Like, you're a student, or you're a hobbyist, or you're someone who's never opened this stuff before, and you want to try and learn to model. We went over some really basic stuff last time, and like I said, we'll go a little bit deeper into that. So I've got my viewports here, if you remember this nifty view. I called them preview panes last time, don't know why. I think that was when I was using Max back in the dark ages. So I am going to make a cube, and I'm just going to get set up here. If you remember this stuff, you select your cube, click, shift, I'm just going to make a square. Alright. And I'm going to insert edge loops. So if you remember last time, you can either shift, select it, there we go. You can shift, right click, insert edge loop tool. You might have it up in top here, hides in a lot of different places. So I'm going to make some edge loops. Again, this is with the assumption that you saw the previous 3D primer video. So you know how to make a box. You know how to rotate around this stuff. I will mention things every now and then just to kind of refresh. Alt, left mouse, rotates you around things. So, first thing we're going to get into is vertice editing. So you have vertex. So remember, when you're in any mode, you just need your object selected. And you hold right click, right mouse, and you can choose either face, and it'll let you choose the faces of your model. Or you hold right click, vertex. And you can select the individual vertices of the model, and you can move them around, manipulate them, all that good stuff. So, I want to start making a shape. The common thing to do is weld vertices to one another, as in what everybody does, ever. So, one way you can do it is you can hold V on your V keyboard deal, and you can just snap to any vertice that is available to you. Now, if you do it this way and snap the same spot, those vertices take up the same place in space-time, but they still are individual vertices. So if you move them, just select one individually and move it around, you can see those polys are still there. So you either need to select them, and you can weld vertices, which is a button up here in your shelf. And when you do that, it'll combine them. Or you can use the, let me move it back, you can use the vertex weld tool, which is in mesh tools. So again, that's spacebar, bring up your hotbox, or it's up at the top here in mesh tools. And then where is this guy? Merge vertex tool. And what that'll let you do, you see you get this little cross here, and you can click one vertice and hold, and go to the next one, and then it'll automatically weld them together. So that's the other way that you can do it. It's a little faster. And again, if you're out of a tool, remember you can just hit the G key on your keyboard and it'll do the last action that you performed. So you can do your weld tool again. So we're just going to go ahead and weld these vertices together. We're not making anything super specific here. It's just kind of going over the tools. So we've welded our vertices. We want to keep a clean model. This is normally after the fact, but you want to try and weld things together and make things as optimized as possible. This is coming from a video game developer perspective. So you could do the same thing again, and we might weld these things together and really cut down on our poly count. You can see if you're watching up here, you can see the try count right now is 32. If I get rid of that guy, it drops to 30. So we keep doing that. We're optimizing our mesh. Now we don't have to do that right now, because sometimes when you're creating a mesh, you want to keep some of your edge loops so that you can add more and all sorts of cool stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and undo it for now. Normally optimization can come a little bit later. Sorry, water. Alright, so we've done our welding, but we have this weird thing going on here, this shading up here that hasn't changed. It looks like a sort of like rounded, even though we can see it's got a couple, just two edges like that. So what's happened is your normals have not adjusted to the fact that their angles have changed. Now what that means, a normal is basically just, if we're going to dumb it down, it's just the model telling Maya or any game engine you put it in that, hey, the front of my face is facing this way. Please light me accordingly. This has to do with shading of your model. It's a little complex, but it's something you'll want to pay attention to, so that's why we're covering it now. So all we're going to focus on is the fact that these edges are what's called soft, which makes it blend from one edge to the other, and these edges on the side are hard, which creates that line, and that's what we want. So there's a couple ways we can do this. We can either just select the mesh and hold spacebar to bring up the hotbox, hold left click on normals, and you have soften and harden edge. You can choose either of those. Choose that. You can see we've got our edges now the way that we want. I'll undo that. So the other thing you can do, you can select your model, and again hold right click, and you add your vertex, face. You also have edge as an option. So you can select just a single edge, and you can go normal, harden edge. And you can see I've just done one now. I have one hard edge. So I'll do that with this edge now. The other thing, again, keep in mind, you have your hotbox, normals, you can choose that, but remember, if you hold Control and Shift at this point and click on it or let up on the mouse button on whichever tool, it'll create a button up in your shelf. And using the shelf is what I do pretty much exclusively in Maya. It's the way I was taught. It's the way I've used it for years. So I work through the shelf. So I have a bunch of extra buttons that may not be up in your view that I've created myself. And I have both soft and hardened edges. So I can click that, and you can see I've got it the way I want. Or I can select it, make it all soft, and we get this weird goopy thing that's super dumb. So make them all hard. There we go. And now what I'm going to do, clear that, I'm going to go ahead and extrude. We went over this last time, but we're going to go over it again just because there's some extra things with it now that we're going a little deeper. So I select my model, hold right click, face, select the face. I want to extrude this up. I want to make kind of like a, I guess, I don't know, let's make like a telephone pole thing or something. Sure. Street light, I don't know. So you can hold spacebar, edit mesh, face extrude. The naming might be a little different from version of Maya to version of Maya. I use 2015, which broke everything up into vertex, edge, and face. 2014 earlier versions are all in one selection. So if you're in 2015 or later, go to face and then extrude. So we get this nifty gizmo comes up, and we can go ahead and move it in whatever direction we want, or we can choose rotate and rotate the thing for whatever weird reason. Or you can press W, E, R to go back out to your regular move tools. It's still extruded though, and you can still move it. So what we're going to do, let me take a step back. We're going to right click, face, select the face, hotbox, edit mesh, face extrude, and we're actually going to scale this. So what I'm going to do is just hit R to scale. I'm going to bring it in about there, and then I'll bring it in here. And you can see that we don't necessarily have to move it up or down. We don't have to define the mesh in that way. The geo is still created by making an extrude. We're choosing what to do with it, and we're scaling it inward, and that's it. So now I have this kind of shape if I want. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the G key, and I'm going to extrude again. So now I have my extrude option again. I'm going to zoom out, mouse wheel, and I'm going to scale it up. Cool. So now I've got this thing. It's all part of one mesh that I've extruded from it. And that's a little bit more about extruding, a little bit more of what you can do with that. So let me see. Let me check my thing here. Boolean. All right. So next thing we're going to go over real quick is Boolean. And that is either making two objects, combining them together, or using an object to carve a shape out of another object. Maybe I want this for some reason to have a circle through it. So I'm going to hit spacebar, and then I'm going to go to my front view, front view, and hit spacebar. And now I only have this view. I'm going to hit 4, go to my wire view. Just 4 on your keyboard, cycles through those things. 5 goes back to shaded. 6 will go to textured. We'll hit that another time. But I want 4 so I can see what's going on. So I'm going to make a cylinder, and it works just like square. Just click, drag out, and then once you've done that, let go, and now you have that box with an up arrow again. That's defining the length of the cylinder. So I'm just going to scroll up. You don't see it in here because you're doing just a side view, but if I go back into my perspective view, you can see I've actually created a cylinder. I'll go ahead and do it again with both views open so you can see what's going on. So I'll create another cylinder right here. You can see it kind of poof into space in the upper right box there. And let go. And now I have this option again, the square with the arrow coming up. So I'm going to go up, and I've created my cylinder. Cool. So we're going to do a Boolean. I'm going to take this cylinder, and I actually want it to intersect. I want a little indentation here. That's what I want. I want a cylindrical coolness thing going here. So that means I want to do a difference Boolean, which means I'm going to choose my base object, which is the thing you want to cut from or carve into, and then I'm going to choose my carving object, I guess I'll call it, the object that I want to essentially disappear after I do it. So hold spacebar, edit mesh, and then, oh, I'm sorry, mesh booleans difference. And you can see it's now disappeared. I have this cool cylindrical hole going on up inside my mesh. It's pretty sweet. So one thing that I gotta go over right now, because I hate it and it's gross, is this geo right here. You can see we've created what's called an n-gon. An n-gon is a polygon that has more than 4 sides. Doesn't matter how many sides, just means it's got more than 4, which means it's bad. We don't want that. There are a lot of engines right now that deal with n-gons just fine. They do their own, they deal with them in their own way. It's just good practice to have at least quads, 4-sided polygons going on, because you don't know ultimately what your mesh is going to go into, what kind of engine it's going to be used in, what shaders it's going to have, how those things are going to be handled. So we could either be super lame and use our cut tool, and we could attach one corner to one edge and just do that all the way around this thing and try and cut it in. That is a way, and it sucks. So sometimes you have to do that. But the easier way is to go to object mode, go to face, right click face, select those 2 faces, just shift to select multiple things, and hold spacebar, and mesh, triangulate. That's it. You can see it has now gone ahead and made these cuts for me and connected the cylinder. So there may be some weird ones you got to clean up, like we've got this guy right here that has 2 edges really close to each other. We may need to clean that up, but there's another step here. After you triangulate it, if you want to take it one step further, let me get back in there, hold spacebar again, go to mesh again, and go to quadrangulate, wherever that's hiding. There it is. Just 2 up from triangulate. Quadrangulate. What that does is that removes any extra lines or polys that aren't needed, any extra cuts, and turns them into quads, turns them into 4-sided. So now that weird line that we had issue with is already gone automatically. So just an easy way to clean up your mesh. Let's see. Next, say I've got this awesome model, I'm super happy with it. Now my plan is to have it show up multiple times. Hey, you got a copy of Maya? Awesome. Good job, dude. I hope you're able to follow along. But now if I've got my sweet thing that I have built here, and I want it to happen a couple times in a level, say I want it to show up a bunch, I can go ahead and clone it and use it over and over and over again. Now the way I do that is I simply select it, and I hit Control D. So all you're doing is holding Control and then hitting D, and that'll create a duplicate in the same spot, and all you have to do is move it. So now you have both. There are other forms of cloning, other forms of duplicating, but we won't go into that right now. It's out of the scope. Again, this is basic. So that's the idea for cloning. So if you have, say you're making a brick wall, and we'll do that real quick. Say I've got my brick, and I'm making my edges. Pay no attention to the things I'm doing here. We'll go over these things in the future. So I've got my brick, and I want it to show up more than once because I'm making a brick wall. So Control D, Control D. Now I can hold Shift, select this guy, I have two, Control D again, offset them. And now you can see I'm already building a brick wall here, and I can select all three of those, Control D. Cool. Also, let's see here, we're nearing the end of this little session and some of the basic things that we're going over here. I did get a question last time about hotkeys in Maya. Like I said, I don't really use them myself. I do when I'm using 3D Studio Max, super hotkey driven. It's just the way to do it. Maya, I was trained using shelves, and that's just the way I work. It has been for years. But if you go to Window, Settings, Preferences, you can go to Hotkey Editor. And in here, you can find every command that exists. So if I want to do any random thing, I can select it, and I can set up a hotkey for it and a modifier of Control, Alt, you know, all those different things, direction, press release, all sorts of stuff, and you can assign it there. You do have to set them up yourself though. There are hotkeys built in. No way I can tell you all of them myself. Again, I modeled the shelf primarily. There's a few hotkeys I use, kind of a mix hybrid thing. But this is where you would set them up, is in the hotkey editor under Window, Settings, Preferences, Hotkey Editor. So that's I hope that's a good enough answer for the question. One thing, we got a little bit extra time, so I'm going to go over something in addition. This was kind of a stretch thing if I had time. And that is going to be extruding again, but along a spline. So let me get rid of this guy. And a spline takes us into another tab, because we were in polygons this whole time working in here. So the other thing that we're going to want is to go into the Curves tab. Same shelf, just different tab. And if I want to, let's see, I'll go into my side view here. I'll do it with all four windows open, so that way you can see what's going on. So creating a spline is really simple. You just choose the spline tool, and then just left click wherever you would like your spline points to go. Now if you click left click and hold, it'll work like a spline in Photoshop or anything else, the way you'd expect it to work. Click and hold, and it'll kind of give a bend to it. I'll go full screen here, so those watching on YouTube with some mild compression issues can kind of see. You left click and hold, and you can see it bends and moves around. So we can do any sort of weird noodly shape. Let's just go ahead and do that so you can see this example. So I've got my spline. It's super great and pretty. I'm going to create a, let's just go ahead and create a, let's just make a plane. So I'll make a plane. That's simple, move it into place. So I want to extrude this along this spline so that it creates basically a four-sided tube that is the shape of this spline. So I'm going to select this. Actually, you know what, let me do it with a box. It's going to give you a better example of what's going on, because you can do it with just a plane, but this is going to be better. So I've got my box, and I decide I want, let's do some rotation stuff to it and everything. I want this face to extrude out. I do a regular extrude, edit mesh, face, extrude, just like I normally do. But I want this one to follow the spline. So I select this edge, and then, or this face, sorry, and then holding left shift, I just click and drag and select this spline. Or I'm sorry, where'd it go? Come on now. Are you gonna give me a hard time? There we go. All right, not sure why I did that, but just try it again if it doesn't work. Just hold face, or select the face, shift, click, drag, whatever. So now I've got these selected, and I do the exact same thing. I do edit mesh, and then face extrude. And you can see it shoots off into space at the very end of the spline there. So if I go over into my attribute editor here on the right, and go to, where's my extrude? Face extrude, here we go. I believe it's this one, let me check. Yeah, okay. So if you don't have this window, if you've closed everything, you were trying to clean up your UI, and you lost your attribute editor and your layers editor and all that sort of stuff, don't worry, it's in display. UI elements, channel box, layer editor will bring you back to layer editor and channel box. Don't worry about what that is. And then UI elements, same thing, display UI elements, attribute editor. This is the one we want. So there's two tabs on the side here on the far right, this spot right here. Go to the attributes editor tab and choose the extrude that you just created. Now under poly extrude face history, that's what you want. I know we're getting a little technical here, but that's the point. We're diving in a little bit more because we had some extra time. And you have a slider here. It says divisions. It just says 1, which is only one division. That's why this guy is what it is. If I add divisions by just cranking it to the right, you can see it starts trying to follow that spline. So I can keep cranking it and keep adding them until it smooths out. And if I reach the end, I can just type in another number. I'm going to put in 50. So you can see it smooths out a lot. So we've done this sweet, nifty extrude along a spline. Now, why would you want to use this? Well, you could either use this for if you want to make tubes lying on the ground, wires, things like that. I've actually used it for trees, and I can show you how. This is before ZBrushing days, and you may find yourself needing to do it somehow. Who knows? So I'm just going to go ahead and create a couple splines here. Leave that for one, and you can create multiple and just build out whatever shapes you need. So there we go. Let's say that's my tree. Again, don't worry about this part. We'll get into all these things. I'm just going to control vertices and manipulating the thing around so that it actually has more than one dimension to it. But as we make more of these, we'll start to cover these nifty other things. So I've got a spline. This does nothing. This doesn't render. This doesn't do anything in terms of modeling than provide a structure at this point in time for my tree. So I'm just going to make a cylinder. This is going to work exactly the same way. So I'm going to my cylinder. Head on down. And I'm going to select faces. So you're going to see me do something here. I'm going to drag select, and holding control, I'm going to drag select again and get rid of these faces. So that deselects them. Holding control will deselect faces. And I want all of these because I'm going to extrude these along my spline. So now I shift drag, and I've got that spline. Spacebar, edit mesh, face, extrude. Same thing again. If you have the attribute editor open, it should just jump to this thing we were talking about earlier automatically, where you have your divisions, and it's the information for this extrude. So I can add some divisions. Cool. You can also, where is it? Smooth angle. Where's my taper? There we go. So under poly extrude curve attributes, again, same window, you can change the taper, which will allow you to make a big old fat thing or make it skinny towards the top. So there we go, there's one. And then if I want to do the same thing, I'll just create another. This is super messy, but it gives you the idea. Rotate this guy. Again, I'm hoping at this point you've seen enough of this stuff, you're following along with what I'm doing. I'm able to move things, rotate things, I'm creating cylinders out of nowhere. It's all pretty straightforward. Again, I select all the faces, and I hold control, deselect those extra faces, so I only have the ones that I want to extrude. And then I shift, click, shift drag, whatever, this spline, spacebar, edit mesh, face, extrude. And then we're back in the same one again, add divisions, and then taper. So it's an ugly version, but you can see how after you created enough and you made them jagged enough, you could create a tree shape with this. So it's an easy way to do it other than just making a box and extruding and extruding and extruding manually. But there's reasons for doing each thing. You could do a combination, any sorts of things. The very last thing I want to cover here, because it can break your model if you're not careful. Not really like not really break your model for the level of what we're talking about here, but it's just something for the future, and it's good practice in Maya, is as you do things to your mesh, as you make extrudes happen and do all sorts of interesting, crazy things to your mesh, you'll see here under inputs, this is in the channel box layer editor, there's all these extra things. This is called your history. Now you'll be able to go back and you can make edits to things that you've done already, but obviously that can get a little cumbersome for your computer. And I've worked on projects before where there's some proprietary plugins that we've made for Maya, shaders, things like that, where once you use them or once you apply them, it'll make your model disappear, it'll break it, things like that. All you got to do is clear history, which I have a button for it up here, but it's edit, delete by type, history. So again, if you want to make a button for that, I've made all sorts of stuff. I have a huge history on this thing. Edit, delete by type, go over to history, hold Control Shift, and then click that, and you see I made a history button over here. So now all I gotta do, and this is just a general practice, as I've gotten about halfway through modeling it, just every now and then I'll hit history and clear it. It's just good practice. Again, you don't really have to worry about it right now. It's just something that if I drill it into your mind right now, if you're going to work in Maya professionally or just making stuff for, say, like the Unity workshop or something like that, it's just good practice to do that sort of thing. Anyway, that's pretty much it for now. We've hit our half-hour mark. I'm going to try and tighten these up more and more and more. But just to recap, we went over extruding from a box, just like we did last week, but a little bit more in depth, where you realize edit mesh, face, extrude. You can scale it, and you don't have to move it up or down. Hit G, same thing. Repeat your task, there you go. And the other one was mesh, insert edge loop. Insert our edge loops, and this was, ignore all that grossness up there, vertex welding. And this is how you get your mesh cleaned down and kind of start carving the things that you want out of it. And that was either using welding vertices together by connecting them using the V key while moving towards a vertice, or by using the vertex weld tool, which is spacebar mesh tool, and that was merge vertex tool, which you just click, hold, combine, and I'll take care of that. History, vertex weld, normals. Normals were selecting edges to fix, like we've done this adjustment where now we have this nice weird smooth thing going on here that doesn't really match the shape of our geo. Maybe you want a smooth edge there, but right now I don't. So I select my edge and I make edges hard, or normals hard. And that's also in spacebar, normals, harden edge. So that's the basics of it. Anyway, that's it again for this 3D primer. Thank you so much for watching live. If you watch live, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching on YouTube. Now I am going to switch over to the regular stream where I'm going to be painting. So thank you again, and see you next time.